Everyone get your coughs out? All right. I'm going to turn the air conditioning off.
It takes a second.
Well, thanks so much for you guys for coming out and sharing your story. It really makes an impact when you share your story and we put it out there. You know, people get educated. There's still so many people brainwashed by the mainstream media about J6. So it makes a difference. So welcome, everyone. Today we're doing a roundtable event for J6ers and victims of government weaponization to share their stories. My name is Sean Morgan. I work with the Patriot Freedom Project. And we are going to be interviewing J6ers, their families, non-J6ers who have been victims of government abuse, especially during the Biden regime. We've had pro-lifers, we've had conservatives punished for their freedom of expression, for their speech, censored, wrongfully accused, persecuted, prosecuted, and actually the government abuse is still happening today. And so we have formed a special initiative called Weaponization Watch, which is tasked with identifying these victims of government abuse and advocating for them in various ways, providing resources so hopefully they can defend themselves legally and get a legal remedy, but also to share their stories in media. And there are a lot of resources that are needed for these victims of government abuse. And today we're going to start with the J6ers themselves telling their stories. So I would like to invite Enrique Tarrio. Come on up, brother. He's going to share his story. Have a seat right here beside me. And your story, Enrique, was all over the mainstream media. They painted you as a mastermind who, even if you didn't set foot in Washington, D.C., somehow you were in a skiff somewhere directing a massive coup of the United States government. Can you go back, do a flashback to when you first got that call or that communication that they were accusing you of wrongdoing?
That sounds cool, doesn't it? The mastermind of J6. I think sitting in this room today, I'm probably the only January 6 poser in here. And the reason why I say that is because obviously I wasn't there. And to tell you, I mean, the day that I found, I didn't think it was possible. The day that I found out that they were coming, my door was turned into toothpicks. That was the very moment that I'm like, okay, wait a second. They could come after me for this, which I thought was ridiculous. They used a document that I didn't even open or read, and the document itself is not. It didn't have any nefarious purpose. So I guess my story starts on January 4th. They arrested me for burning a Black Lives Matter banner, and the judge instructed me to not be in the district. Like, she instructed me as part of my bail for me not to, how do you say it? I'm looking for the legal word, but for the most part, she told me I can't be in DC during January 6th. And, you know, I complied with that legal order. I didn't agree with it at first, but I'm like, you know what? I was traveling so much for those 2 months. I'm like, you know what? I'll just take a break. Just hang out in the hotel. I saw the events of January 6th transpire over the TV. And then subsequently was arrested for watching it on TV. Did I celebrate it that day? Yes. You know, I celebrated it like most of America did. But is that illegal? That's where the real question of justice begins, right? Like, can you get arrested for your speech? And in this case, during the Biden regime, the answer to that is unequivocally yes, you could.
And so what did you go through financially and legally to defend yourself?
Financially, it was very, very expensive. We knew we were going to trial. We knew we needed a lawyer that knew the ropes, so we hired 2 attorneys out of Miami. And thanks to some crowdfunding, we were able to afford those attorneys. And we had the longest trial in not only in J6, but the longest trial in DC history, full of corruption. You had FBI agents listening to attorney-client privilege phone calls. they were hiding FBI informants from our case. They were hiding it from us. And you also had the falsification of evidence. They told the grand jury that I opened this 1776 returns document, and that wasn't true, and they knew it wasn't true, and they still presented it to the grand jury.
And so what was the result of the legal case?
The result of the legal case is the result of pretty much almost every legal case that has to do with January 6th that was based out of D.C. You had a jury that already showed that they had a bias, that they hated us, that they thought Donald Trump was a Nazi, a white supremacist, and they thought the same thing of us. And those people were allowed to sit on the jury. So we never had we lost that trial. I think like most January 6ers in here, we lost that trial on day one on jury selection. It wasn't even about presenting the case. The government could have, in our case, the government didn't even have to present a case. All they had to do was open with, good morning, members of the jury. These guys are the Proud Boys. I rest my case. That's all they had to do, and they would have found us guilty of all counts, no matter what. They didn't care. And that's, we think of how unfair it is for a defendant, but that's also unfair for the jury to put them in that position, knowing that they have a bias and forcing them to sit in a trial for 6 months. I don't have sympathy for most of those jurors, but if you want to put yourself in their shoes for a second, like, don't put me in a trial. Don't put me in the jury of a trial for like Joe Biden. Don't do that to me. I'm going to try to be as fair and impartial as possible, but I know how my emotions are. So I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. Right. And it's not fair. That's not justice.
Yes, I know that's one of the goals of the Matthew Perna bill is to not have all of these cases tried in Washington, D.C. because of the bias that's there. So you were facing 22 years in prison. Is that what it was?
50.
50.
They're at first, what they wanted to do after we lost our trial is they wanted to give me 50 years. They ended up wanting to give me, on paper, 33 years. And the judge, he's such a nice guy. He didn't go with the 33. He gave me 22, which I'm kind of happy he did. In a way, I was very happy he did, because I was like, well, I think most people, even people that didn't like what they saw on January 6th, even people that disagree with President Trump, see a 22-year sentence for a person that wasn't there as they would have seen it as being ridiculous. Yeah. And I think that opened a lot of people's eyes too. So I'm kind of thankful for it. And again, look, I wasn't there that day, and people always are like, oh, well, he's the guy, he's the 22-year guy. And I kind of like, I don't like hearing it, because there was a lot of people that suffered a lot more than I did, and they didn't get a tenth of the time that I did. A lot of people like lost things, and they only got like 30 days in prison. They lost their families, they lost their homes, they lost their careers. Some people didn't even go to jail and lost all of that. So it's kind of like I feel like I'm part of the community, but I wasn't part of the community that day. They targeted me because of my speech. And that also makes me kind of happy, right? Because if your speech is so dangerous to a tyrannical government, which is what the Biden regime did, then obviously I'm doing something right. But to accuse me of sedition, which is attempting to overthrow the government by force, is excuse my language, but it's bullshit.
Yeah, the absurdity of it does wake people up. And so what were you thinking whenever they did hand that sentence of 22 years? What were you thinking about? Were you projecting into the future and thinking about serving those 22 years? Were you extremely hopeful that President Trump would win and there'd be a different result? Or did you also think maybe Kamala Harris would be president and you'll be rotting in prison for 22 years?
It's not binary. It's not like I thought. I was like, oh, well, I wasn't going to I knew I wasn't going to serve 22 years. I knew one way or another whether through appeal or whether through the Supreme Court or through a pardon, I was going to go home early. But to be honest, what I felt that day, it wasn't sadness, it was anger, because while I got sentenced to 22 years, my family was sitting in the pews, specifically my mom, and while her son was getting sentenced to 22 years, you had Officer Harry Dunn laugh in her direction. So I can't tell you that I'm still not angry. I can't tell you that I'm the same person. I've always been a happy person, but I'm to be like very honest and blunt, like I'm an angrier person now. I'm a person that wants to see the people that committed these acts and destroyed families. I want them to be investigated. I want them to be indicted, and I want them to be sent to prison. And that's, I use the word retribution, retaliation, and I know it's a little bombastic, but what does that mean? I don't want to harm them. I don't want physical violence to happen to them. Retribution, retaliation means justice. Because if we do not set the tone now, whenever they steal the election again, they're going to put us back in chains. So if there's no consequences for weaponizing the Department of Justice, with many cases, it's not just January 6th, with many of these cases, politically motivated cases, we're going to see it again. And I don't want to see it again because I don't know how I'm going to feel if it happens to me again.
That's for sure. And I know you don't have all the answers, none of us do, but what are some of the big picture things that you think need to happen for this type of thing to never happen again? And what are some specifics in the political machinery of our country? Like, who needs to be indicted? Who needs to be investigated? What does that look like to you, that type of accountability?
That kind of accountability has to do with, and it has to do with all three branches of the government. The co-equal branches of the government. You know, the executive needs to really think about like what laws it's enforcing and what laws are unconstitutional. Congress needs to de-legislate. I mean, we have too many laws in the books. We could arrest anybody for anything at any time. You want to give somebody 20 years, you can do it. All you got to do is do a little bit of digging, find a felony that they committed, and put them in prison for it. You could also, do what they did with the Whitmer kidnapping hoax, where they go ahead and they plant evidence, they plant people, and they destroy these guys' lives, and it wasn't their fault. It was the FBI, and that came out. So, and then when you're talking about the Supreme Court needs to start striking down these laws, these excess legislation, because how do politicians get elected? Well, they go, well, we're going to legislate. We're going to make more laws. I want a politician that says, no, we're going to take laws out. There's 22,000 gun laws in this country. There's 22,000 of them that are unconstitutional, period. This isn't meant to be, our country wasn't meant, and I you know what? I love that we're a superpower. I love that we live in this we're sitting in a hotel room right now. Many countries, you can't even do this in many countries. And I appreciate that, but that's not what our founding fathers envisioned. It was a much simpler idea, a much simpler enterprise of just being able to own your property and be left alone. And I'm going to quote Gavin here, there's two types of people in the world. There's the people that want to be left alone and those that don't want to leave them alone. I want to be left alone. And there's 1,600 of us, and behind us there's 30 times that between families and supporters, and they don't deserve it. And we need to do something about it. And like I said, accountability looks like justice, getting these people, investigating them, everybody, from paralegals to prosecutors to judges. We need to fix this system.
Well, you mentioned that you have more anger now than before. You've been wronged. So how are you going to channel that anger? What's your personal mission as an individual, an activist, a citizen? What's your future look like?
I think the way that all of our future looks, because everybody in this room, every J6er in this room isn't just a J6er that got pardoned or left prison and just sat down and is like, you know what, I'm going to be a hermit. I'm going to go to Dagobah and just relax in a cave. Everybody here is active, and I think all of us, we have our focuses and we have our beats that we focus on. What that looks like for me is I'm going to channel that anger, and I'm going to create content, and I'm going to push legislation, and I'm going to push not only the people in this room, but people that I know to run for office or help those that have our values get elected.
Excellent. That's really constructive.
Yeah.
Because I could see not just you, but anyone who has that type of anger could easily channel it towards a different type of retribution, retaliation.
Yeah. And, you know, I love my family so I wouldn't want to put them in that position again.
Yeah.
But the thing is, look, they did it with my case, and they did it with 1,600 others. You don't need to do anything to get locked up for decades. And if we don't fix it, it's going to be a huge issue, and we're going to hang together, you know, and not in the way that we hung last night. So I think that path to retribution, which is justice, I think is a necessary step, and I'm taking every step possible, and help others is another big thing, right? Because in order to save the West, you must replicate the minds of those who have its best interests at heart, right? So it's important that we replicate ourselves, not just think selfishly, make more of yourself. Create, if you create content, make more content creators. If you have more advocates, bring more people with you, teach them the ropes. I think that's super important.
Absolutely. Make it scalable. Maybe have more children, more conservative children.
Amen.
Stay up here, Enrique. Paul, come on up. We have another J6 defendant, Paul Ray, with a related case.
Hey, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
So tell me about what happened with you with J6, your story from the beginning. You can hold the microphone and tell us about what happened.
All right, so yeah, I actually was on the ground that day. As a matter of fact, I planned on meeting up with Enrique a couple days prior, and we all know what happened with that. But really what I want to focus on with my story was the treatment of the FBI coming into my house, and the fact that, you know, me being a law-abiding taxpayer my entire life, having very minimal rap sheet, maybe some speeding tickets, the way that I was treated by the FBI was unbelievable. Unlike anything that any American citizen, you know, short of somebody that's a murderer, should have gone through. And really, I'll start with the morning of, where we knew that the FBI was coming at some point. Everybody was getting picked up, and it was just a matter of time before the FBI was coming to my house. And so we wake up that morning. My wife draws the blinds and says, you know, they're here. And so right away I popped out of bed. I knew what she was talking about. This is probably 7 a.m. in the morning. And so she must have spooked the FBI and ruined the element of surprise there. And next thing you know, my phone rings, and so I answer it. And it's the special agent in charge out front. And he says, you know, I want you to do exactly as I say. Come to the door with nothing in your hands. Set your cell phone down with your hands up, and so I start doing that. And so I open the door to riot shields, AR-15s, lasers pointed at us, Bearcats. The entire neighborhood's blocked off. So as I make my way through the door, I move out of the way, and these AR-15s that were once focused on my body are now aimed at my 1-year-old baby's head, my wife's head. They're painted in lasers. I'm turned around staring at them. And it's a miracle that I'm still alive, because it took everything in me to not pull these rifles out of these guys' hands and get shot for it. because it's almost impossible for anybody, any father, any mother in this room, to not see their baby painted with lasers from rifles and not do something about it. It was probably the toughest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life. And again, as far as the events of January 6th went, if I'm guilty of anything that day, it's trespassing. I didn't touch any cops. I didn't break anything. I didn't break in anywhere. I walked through open doors. I was waved in by police. So the crimes that they're accusing us of just did not happen. I think, like Enrique said, I think it's more of who we are. We were an easy target. I'm a fellow Proud Boy of Enrique's, and we were the marketable people to pin this on. The Oath Keepers, Proud Boys. So it wasn't so much what we did that day; it's who we are.
Right. And they could have just called you and said, surrender yourself, and you would have just walked over to whatever address they told you to show up at.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If they called me that morning and said, hey, can you meet us down at the local Tampa FBI field office, I would have gladly gone down there. I wasn't given the opportunity.
Well, let's not say gladly.
Well, let's not say gladly, but I would have gladly have chosen that over what actually happened. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so what was the result of your case? What happened? What were you charged with, and what was the result of your case?
So originally I was charged with the 1512 obstruction of Congress, like I think most people were charged with. I think they were blanket charges. It was the 1512 obstruction of Congress. It was the civil disorder. So you were either charged with one or the other or both. Mine was the 1512 along with a slew of, I think, misdemeanors and I think one of the felony that I was charged with the civil disorder as well. Actually, I'll tell you a story about that as well. So if you guys remember, 1512 was challenged by the Supreme. That was brought to the Supreme Court, and so the entire from start to finish up until the Supreme Court heard the 1512 arguments. That was the felony, the main felony that I was faced with. It was they carried a 20-year penalty. So when the Supreme Court heard the case and overturned the 1512, deeming it unconstitutional, I thought that my case, that was the resolution and that maybe I'd settle on a misdemeanor or something like that. The same week that the Supreme Court overturned the 1512, I think it was 2 days later, my attorney calls me and he says, hey, I got bad news. They slapped you with the civil disorder, the felony. So this was 3 years into, 3 years into my indictment where I wasn't charged with the civil disorder, but then all of a sudden they decided that I should have been charged with the civil disorder because they dropped the 1512 felony. So the way that I saw that, and you can take it for what it's worth, was we don't care what we're charging this guy with, we're charging him with a felony. This guy's going to prison one way or the other. I almost feel like if the civil disorder charge was deemed unconstitutional, they would have found something else, another felony. So is that justice? Is it justice that this guy broke the law, he needs to pay the price, or this guy's going to prison because we want him to go to prison? And that's the scary part about it, is law-abiding citizens in this country, just like the Gretchen Whitmer case. The FBI or the federal government in general, if they want you in prison, all they have to do is wave a magic wand at you and you're going to prison. The conviction rate in this country is 99% federal conviction rate. That means if you go to trial, if you're arrested by the federal government, guess what? You're going to prison. There's no fighting it. So that isn't justice in this country. That's a dictatorship. That's totalitarianism. That's we want you in prison, you're going to prison. So that's judge, jury, and executioner there. So that's just not the America that I want to live in or that I remember.
Right. And so when Kamala Harris was running for president against President Trump, what were you thinking about the different ways your future could go, and how did that play out in your mind?
Well, I think that was probably obviously on everybody's mind at the time, mainly the people that happened to be in prison at the time. But it was, if Kamala gets in, that's the end of us. And not only that, I was thinking in my head, not only am I going to prison, but my family's probably going to prison. There's many other Americans that are probably going to prison if Kamala gets in, because if Biden was able to get away with what he got away with, stealing the election, us standing up against it, and them throwing us in prison for doing so, what's going to happen to the rest of the red parts of America? I think the story was already written at that point. And so what was going through my head, believe it or not, was it was a slew of things, but mainly getting out of this country. I had plans in place to flee. And I had concrete plans in place to flee. I heard that Russia was offering sanctuary for J6ers and set up a whole city over in Russia. I thought about going down to the embassy and seeing what that was all about, because at that point there, what can you do? Well, your mind thinks in ways that it's never thought before. I never thought that I'd be in a position like this where I would even have to, where I would even be faced with a choice like this. So you get very creative with what you plan on doing, and your mind just starts racing. I have ADD and ADD naturally, so my mind's always racing, so it's always going in a million different directions. So, what are your options? Do you stay there and let this government steamroll over you and kill you and your family and friends, or do you do something about it? And what can you do at that point? Your options are very limited. Right. So it was a very trying time, I think, for everybody.
Well, my question now is, I can see with Enrique, it's given him a type of vigilance to want to fix this so this doesn't happen to anyone else in the country. What's your take, and how have you taken this experience, and personally, what is your personal mission? Do you just want to be left alone, never think about this ever again, or do you want to participate in reforming the system so it doesn't happen again?
So what it looks like to me is my goal going forward. I've never been an activist of any sort. I've always just kind of been laid back, want to live my life and be left alone. I think like the majority of red-blooded Americans. But this actually has been a pivot point in my life where now my mission is to educate. I want to go out and educate the public as to how corrupt and radical this government has gotten, how much power the federal government has gotten, and how what level of corruption they actually are. I think we all knew that the federal government was corrupt. I think we can all agree that, listen, there's some corruption going on up in Capitol Hill, and these people are not straight shooters. To what level, I don't think anybody knew until January 6th came around, or the likes of. And I want all of our stories to be heard, and what we've all gone through, and to educate the rest of the United States, the citizens of the United States, that this is possible, this can happen, and it can happen to you. It doesn't matter who you are. Nobody's above this, unless you're probably working for the federal government, and even them, they can even turn on each other, I guess. But so my plan going forward is to educate the rest of the United States on our stories, share our stories. Everybody should share their stories, and really open people's eyes as to the possibilities of what can happen if, in fact, you go against this government. This isn't North Korea. This isn't China. This isn't some banana republic where, if you say something bad about your government, you get sent to prison. But it's turning that way very rapidly, it looks like. So I just want everybody to understand that.
Well, I'm really happy that an American citizen like yourself wasn't forced to flee his country to former Soviet Russia, where they had gulags and torture and re-education, and that same type of radicalism infected our own republic, and you were a victim of it. So I'm happy that you've decided to educate others, because it can happen in one generation. It has already happened here, and it could set roots. So before you guys step off, I wanted to get your reaction, Enrique, as a guy in your brotherhood. Mm-hmm. How do you feel when you see, of course, when it happens to yourself, you think, okay, I need to be tough for myself and my own family. But when you see your own best friends and your friends go through this, what goes through your mind?
So what's I didn't get picked up for about a year and change. We had a podcast before January 6th, and then two of my co-hosts became co-defendants. So what I did is after they got arrested, and Paul got arrested and a couple other people got arrested, I became an advocate, and I became something that I always said I wasn't going to be, a one issue voter, a one-issue activist. So I was voicing my opinion on it. I think that's another reason why they came after me, because I was going hard against it, bringing a whole bunch of lawyers in, helping the guys raise money. But it was unreal that like all these people around me were getting picked up, and like people that I knew, like Paul was, we were very close. We'd travel together. We'd go everywhere, and he just got picked up. I'm like, wait a second. Yeah, I didn't even ask Paul if he went into the Capitol. I'm like, I don't want to know whether anybody went in. I don't want to be, I don't want somebody to ask me. And then when he gets indicted, I see everything. I'm like, wait a second, you're accusing him of just walking in and out. I'm like, maybe he touched a cop. No, it was nothing. And as you saw, we beat them at the Supreme Court with the Fisher case, and they went ahead. They're like, oh, well, you beat them on this case. Well, let's give you this charge now that's equivalent. But I'm always going to be an advocate. And look, like I said before, I hate that a lot of people focus on me because of the 22-year sentence. But I'm going to use that bullhorn that they've given me to advocate for everybody here. I'm going to use that bullhorn to advocate for people that were victims of the weaponization of our Department of Justice and our executive branch, to be honest. And we've mentioned the Whitmer case, but we have Douglas Mackey. We have countless others. The COVID hoax, people that were Planned Parenthood with Bev. And 22 others. I'm always going to use, and what they've given me, they've done the opposite effect. They're like, well, we're going to lock this guy up so he wouldn't talk anymore. And basically, they've kind of done the opposite. They've given me a bullhorn to use however I want, and I'm going to use it to advocate for everybody. And I try to do the best job I could. Sometimes I fail at that, but what happened to Paul would happen to the 1,600 other people. What happened to Joe Biggs, Dominic Pizzola, Zachary Rio, and Ethan Nordine, and Jessica Watkins, Stuart Rhodes. I could sit here and name names all day. Like, that's wrong, and it needs to stop.
Well, I think your quote of Gavin was really honing in on what we're really trying to secure in our country. It's just that basic freedom.
I didn't say the full quote. The full quote has a lot of cuss words in it, and we're trying to keep it clean here.
Well, thank you for doing your part to secure freedom for the next generations. Really appreciate both of you for coming up and sharing your story.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you guys for doing the same.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Enrique.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Patriot Freedom Project.
Absolutely. All right. Is Will Pope here? There he is. Free State Will.
Yeah.
Hopefully you fit in the frame.
I'll try to.
Thanks for joining. You've been an amazing advocate on X.com, sharing your story and your journey. Representing yourself seems like an impossible task with a federal government that has unlimited resources weaponized against you. Take us back to the beginning of what happened with January 6th and your case.
Yeah, so initially I went to Washington with my brother. We were planning a road trip to go camping, check out a few national parks on the East Coast. We wanted to see the president's final speech. We thought of his presidency. And then after his speech, we just kind of walked down like everybody did to the Capitol. And every time I'd been to Washington before, you'd been able to go onto Capitol grounds, right up to the Capitol, no issue. So we didn't think anything of it when we already saw the lawn full of people. And the moment we got to the west side, there was no fighting going on. There was no flashbangs going off or gas in the crowd. So to us, it just looked like a normal assembly of people there. And eventually we made our way to the east side of the Capitol. We just kind of hanging out in the courtyard there. And we saw people coming out of the Capitol through the Senate carriage doors, which is under the northeast steps. And we were curious. We went out to check what it was what was going on because we didn't know they were letting protesters in the Capitol. That's what we thought at the time. And we looked down the hallway. We saw a ton of people in the building. So a couple minutes earlier is when the first people had come into the Capitol, and a bunch of them came down that hallway, and some came out that door, and we just watched at that door for a couple of minutes. One of those guys who came out then tried to get his way back in. Police pushed him out, and then he came behind me and began like repeatedly lunging into me and pushed me into the Capitol. So we were in there for about 20 minutes, went through Statuary Hall and the Rotunda. We didn't do anything. We didn't hurt anyone. We didn't break anything. Eventually we asked an officer, how do we get out of here? And he pointed to the door. We left through the memorial doors. We went to the metro station, and we took off. But about a month later, February 12th, they arrested my brother and I. He lives in Idaho. He lived in Idaho at the time, and I live in Kansas. But so my world changed at that moment, and they charged me with 2 felonies and 6 misdemeanors for being entirely peaceful on January 6th. And that changed the course of my entire life, because after that, everything imploded, whether it be school or work or relationships. Everything, it seemed like daily I was losing access to an account or, losing my job, whatever. And that just began the fight for the next 4 years. So,
well, some people, that type of pressure would cause them to feel victimized, shut down, go into depression, and give up and surrender. What was your reaction?
Initially, the first year was tough. The first year was psychologically tough, I think, for everybody. And we didn't have a whole lot of information. We didn't know what was going on. It was a very Orwellian feel of what was happening in our country. This had never happened to American citizens before. So it was tough. And I tried to keep a low profile that first year, which is very much against my nature because I like to fight back. And I was highly unsatisfied with my court-appointed counsel because they weren't communicating with me. They weren't really doing anything on my case. My second court-appointed counsel, he couldn't even use a computer. So during that time, I began researching the video on my own because I wanted to be able to defend myself in some way. And so I began developing a knowledge of what happened. And I just, hour after hour, I'd pour through video. And I made the decision in the summer of 2022 to begin representing myself because I felt like by that point I developed a skill set with the facts of January 6th that gave me an advantage over what any of these attorneys who really didn't know what happened had.
What about procedural knowledge? Did you feel like you were capable of doing the legal procedures?
At that point, no. That was the big intimidating factor because there is a lot of case law and procedure that you need to know to represent yourself in court. I had picked up a little bit, but I just felt like I would pick that up along the way, and I had an advantage at least with my factual understanding of it. And I believed if I had access to the discovery, my ability to explore the video and the documents, I would be able to find things potentially that could help out. But it was a big decision. I didn't take it lightly. I think some people did. They just kind of jumped into representing themselves without really thinking it through. I knew it would involve a lot of work and it was a big risk, but quite frankly, people were getting railroaded, and I figured we needed to have an unconventional way to fight back to a very unconventional prosecution of Americans. And so I took a different approach, and at the time, we were a long ways away from the 2024 election, so there was no guarantee that President Trump or a friendly president would get back in, but I knew I had to fight back in a different way and try to combat what was going on with information or whatever. So, it was a big decision, and initially it was just about trying to get access to the video, but eventually I began filing motions in my case, trying to compel discovery and trying to fight some of the charges that they brought against me. So
it sounds like a full-time job, and it sounds like it would be expensive to finance yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it pretty much consumes your life, right? It's like working two full-time jobs, quite frankly. I mean, there were months where I do maybe 16 hours a day working on it. It was a lot of work, and I burned through all my savings. I did begin, because I developed a reputation for my proficiency with the video, I began helping a few of the defense attorneys, helping their clients. So I wasn't bringing in much, but I was bringing in a little bit from helping them out. So some of like the exhibits I created would appear in the Oath Keepers case or some of the other cases. But I survived. And, I live in Topeka, Kansas, so I could live pretty cheaply, but it was tough, right? And I just kind of had to have faith, like in the Bible, the widow with the oil that never ran out. Like I barely got by, and it was tough though. But
So what was the legal result of your case?
So obviously, like everybody, I'm in the clear at this point, but along the way I had to fight. Like there was no guarantee that Trump would win. There was no guarantee that charges would be dropped or pardons would be coming. And even with the election, like I had a trial date initially in July of last year. I had to prepare for that. That got vacated due to the Fisher ruling, which threw out the top line charge in my case, the obstruction of the official proceeding. And then I had another trial date scheduled to begin for the beginning of December of 2024. So after the election, but before the inauguration. So I had to continue to fight all the way through. And one thing that I did, one of the motions I filed was a bill of particulars, because some of the charges that they would bring against us are very vague. And I wanted more specifics about what the government was accusing me of. That way I would have more of an opportunity to counter it or defend against those accusations. So my judge actually partially granted that motion, and he required the government to provide specifics for 3 of the charges that they brought against me. 2 of them were related to impeding ingress or egress into the Capitol. And I pointed out, like, there is nothing that I did during the day that would satisfy the statutory requirements for this charge. And the government came back and they dropped those 2 charges pre-trial, so I beat those pre-trial. And then the 3rd charge that he required them to provide particulars for was the parading charge. And like I had really not paraded at all in the Capitol. I waved my American flag. I did chant USA one time, but that was it. But the government came back and said, because I had carried an American flag in support or against a particular ideology, and they didn't say what ideology that was, I was guilty of a criminal act. So they said carrying the American flag in the United States Capitol was a crime. And they didn't want to throw that one out, but I put it out there and said, hey, they're criminalizing the American flag in the U.S. Capitol, which is about as tyrannical as you can get in America. And you just had to mock them and embarrass them for what they were doing. And the American people were seeing that and saying, hey, we do not want another 4 years of this tyranny. And I think the collective telling of our stories helped turn the tide on that.
Yes. And so what was your life like before January 6th, and what is your new mission or career now after January 6th?
Well, my life before January 6th, I was a PhD student at Kansas State University. I was teaching for Kansas State. I was also occasionally teaching for Fort Hays State University in Kansas. And after January 6th, Fort Hays State turned off my faculty email. They removed me from their list of adjunct instructors on their website. Kansas State University, they fired me after my arrest. But they couldn't remove me as a student. So I remained a student the entire way through, and now I am working on finishing my PhD up. So for the near future, my mission is to complete my PhD. I've gone through my preliminary exams now, and I'm a PhD candidate. And so the dissertation is all that I have left. And I intend to do my dissertation on the legal battle that we as January 6 defendants fought, because I believe that we need to document academically what we went through before that is forgotten.
Yes.
So I'm going to be going into detail on that, and that'll be my mission probably for the next year. And other than that, just trying to survive. But
that's great, because
yeah.
we always talk about what can we do to make sure this never happens again, and that seems like a novel or unique example of how we can really historically do that.
Yeah, I mean, I know I need to finish my PhD. I'm not going to give up on it at this point, even though, it's a lot of work. But I feel like, in a way, God put me in a position to use my academic degree to document it. And I think the skills that I had at that point enabled me to do a lot of the research that helped in my case and in other cases. So, so that's my mission for the near future. Other than that, I really don't have any agenda or mission beyond that, and I'll kind of figure it out after I complete the doctorate.
That's wonderful that you're continuing that. You can't let them, whoever they are, stop you from pursuing your career. But just as I've witnessed your story, I'm just impressed that you were forced to become basically a lawyer. You were forced to become basically an activist.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like you would be perfect to be a politician, because you have to have that legal knowledge. You have to be able to communicate with people in the media. Is that something you would ever consider? Or when you see other J6ers share their story, do you ever think that to yourself? These are the types of people we need in office.
You do need people that'll fight. I think, like right now, I have no appetite for politics. I did run for city council in Topeka back in 2019 because I just wasn't happy with how our city was being managed. And I volunteered for a few campaigns before, but kind of having that knowledge of the work that it takes to run for politics. And I know there are other J6ers doing it, and I don't want to discourage them, but it is a lot of work, and it's also a lot about timing. And I don't think right now is like I have the energy, and it's also not the right time for me to do anything like that. And I don't have the appetite for it right now, and I don't know if I ever will. You never rule anything like that out, but I don't know that I'm going to be too involved in politics.
No pressure.
Yeah, like right now, like the Kansas City Republicans or different Republican groups, occasionally will call me to talk in an event, and I do try to raise awareness about what happened to January 6th defendants, and I think we as J6ers, we have an obligation to put that information out there, because a lot of damage has been done to our image, and we got to put the truth out there and what actually happened. And also, there are a few defendants that, they'll probably continue to embarrass us forever. And we're not a monolithic group. We each kind of do our own thing. But I'm trying to put a good representation for J6ers out there, and I think most of us are doing that. And just trying to prove it. Yeah.
You've represented well, and that self-guided tour of the Capitol changed your life forever.
I did get a second tour. I probably should add that. I got the first ever court-ordered tour of the U.S. Capitol last year. So
don't bring a flag. Yeah. Don't bring a flag.
I didn't bring a flag.
But it's incredible that I think a regime, when they choose these types of tactics, they count on people to just lay down and take it. They don't count on someone intelligent, someone diligent and vigilant to fight back in all the various ways that it takes to fight back, legally, financially, morally, and on the media with communication. And I think you really rose to the occasion in so many ways.
Yeah, and if I could add briefly, it was a very tough experience, and the odds for all of us 4 years ago were impossible. There was no prospect of us getting through it. Everybody thought we were going to be convicted. But I had to have the attitude to resolve to persevere no matter what happened. And for anyone who might be faced with tyranny in the future, you have to resolve to persevere. You have to push back against tyranny. Otherwise, it'll just run you over and become much worse. And I think the collective pushback, not just from J6ers, but from other Americans who were very frustrated with the direction of the country, that collective pushback over the last 4 years helped us turn the corner.
Yeah.
But there is more work to be done because there is still like lingering weaponization issues that need to be taken care of.
So if you didn't have other American patriots out there supporting you and encouraging you, it would have been a lot harder.
Yeah, there weren't many at first, for sure. I wish there were more. I think over time, the information battle was part of it. We had to show what actually happened that day. And as people became more aware, I think we got more people supporting us. But yeah, it took a collective impact, and obviously President Trump was very supportive in his campaign, and I'm hopeful that the administration will still be supportive because there are kind of lingering issues from January 6th that need to be looked into and resolved.
And how about your spiritual faith? I mean, that's what came to my mind when you were talking about how the odds seem impossible, but you just have to keep persevering. But what do you lean on? It's not necessarily knowledge or understanding.
Yeah, you know, there was one other moment in life where I faced impossible odds, and like I had a kayaking accident in Yellowstone, and I nearly died there. I was in the cold water for 3.5 hours, and that was enough time to die 3 or 4 times over. And that showed me that sometimes the impossible isn't impossible. Like sometimes God will give you an escape. Just like Paul Ray was saying, his brain was being like very creative, trying to find a solution. I tried to use the pressure to find a solution, and also, you know, have faith in God. And obviously, you know, it's difficult to maintain faith when times are tough. But ultimately, God is the only hope that we all have. So, yeah.
I'm glad that you turned to him in that hour because it encouraged, it wasn't just for you and your family, it encouraged probably thousands of people and hundreds of J6ers by your tenacity. So thank you for doing what you did and sharing your story along the way.
Yeah, I will say on that, like anytime along the way, a lot of us held on just by nuggets of hope. Like, and any time someone would push back or fight, oftentimes, you know, that would give me like the motivation to continue fighting as well. And I know that's probably true of other people. They've reached out and said, hey, what you did there, that filing, you know, that really, I hung on that or whatever. And part of it was morale. You've got to mentally keep in the game and keep fighting. Those of us who are on the outside had a very different fight than those who were in the gulag, but like maintaining hope and maintaining the will to overcome is a big part of it. So,
well, you have a brilliant mind, and I know that Cynthia and the Patriot Freedom Project and everyone involved has actually turned to you and your work and your research, and it's really encouraging to us at the organization along the way.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
And I'm thankful to, like, let me say, I'm thankful to the Patriot Freedom Project because they have tried to help families, and you know, it wasn't just a mental game, but a physical game for a lot of people. And there were families who maybe their power got shut off, or for whatever reason they were in a financial crunch. And the Patriot Freedom Project tried to help as many as they could, and especially the children. Like Cynthia was really concerned about the kids who were without their dad or without their mom. And they've been an important part of it. And they've had a lot of people that have come after them because they knew that the Patriot Freedom Project was doing good work. So,
right. That's the spiritual battle. Whenever you're doing the right thing, you've got people coming after you. All right. Thank you, Will, for sharing your story. Really appreciate
glad
it.
to be here, man.
All right, everyone, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to turn the air conditioning on.
Great job, Will.
Thank you.